All right, we are back with another episode of Divorce Well in Florida, What to Know Before Your Spouse Does. And like always, I'm here with my law partner, Brian Dunmire. And my name is Matthew Waring. And we are both the principal attorneys at Fairway Law Group, Florida divorce law firm. And today, we're going to talk about what clients can do to minimize their bills when they're paying a lawyer by the hour, things that they could do to kind of maximize the bang for the buck. But before we get into that, Brian and I have been having some conversations about what the playlist is going to be for our annual bird trip that we go on every year. Brian, do you want to fill people in on what the bird trip is?
Well, I was going to say, I don't even know that we need to explain what the bird trip is because it's just gotten so popular in the last couple of years that everybody listening should know.
Right.
Yeah, it's for those of you who are listening who do not know what the bird trip is. We have a friend who passed a few years ago. His name was Anthony, and we were all in a fraternity together in college, and his nickname was Bird. And so we go down to Key West every year. We've been going for, 15, 16 years now, maybe even a little bit longer.
Might be 17 or 18 years, I think.
Yeah, ever since spring break in college. We all graduated college and then looked around and said, what do we do now? And we just kept going down to spring break. So
well, we don't go down on spring break.
Oh, definitely not.
Because we are adults.
We're too old for that.
Yeah, we go in April, which is far and away from spring break. You know, many of us are married or have children, so you know these bird trips are a lot more toned down from what they used to be in the past. But it's really just a way for a bunch of people just to reconnect once a year. But enough said. There will be some more debate going back and forth on what the golf cart playlist should be, but nevertheless, you know, we take family law cases, and we bill by the hour, and we like to try to get our clients the most bang for the buck that they can with their retainers. We understand that they're private people. They're not big companies. They're not all wealthy. It's not an insurance company paying the bills. So we're mindful of that. But there are just so many things that the clients can do to try to get a better bang for their buck when they're paying a lawyer by the hour. And today we wanted to just share some of those from the client side, things that the clients can control, things that the clients can do in divorce cases to try to save some money and try to reach, an efficient resolution to their divorce case. So Brian, what kind of things can clients do to minimize their bills when they're paying a divorce lawyer by the hour?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt and I do a number of consultations, hundreds of consultations a month. And I would consistently say that the number one question we get is, how much is this going to cost me when it's all said and done? And I always answer it as honestly as I possibly can, which is there's no way for me to tell you that. I don't know, because every case is different. Sometimes we have to go to hearings. Sometimes we have to go to mediation. Sometimes we have to file motions. So it's impossible to say how much a case is going to cost. But having dealt with a lot of cases over the years where the clients are billed by the hour, which also goes all the way back to insurance defense days, billing insurance clients by the hour, there are definitely some things that can help minimize your bills that I've recognized, and I see some clients doing it, whether they know it or not. And then I also see some clients who don't do these types of things. And Matt and I certainly try to be very fair with our bills. We don't look for fights just for fights. There's an old saying when it comes to divorces that when you fight on principle, the only people who win are attorneys. And we just really try not to subscribe to that method because it's just not fair for the clients, and that's not how we want to build our business. But with that being said, we still bill by the hour. It's a business, and this is a service that we offer, and we'd like to think that we offer a very good service to our clients. And there are ways to keep your bill lower while accomplishing your goals. So some cases are just going to be drop-down fights. There's going to be fights about everything. And it kind of is what it is. If you're caught in one of those contentious divorces and we can talk about those a little later. But if you're kind of in your standard divorce, you and your wife have been married 4 or 5 years, and you just don't want to be married anymore, but you're not really fighting, just having your documents organized and getting them over to us when we request them, and not having us have to call 2 3 times, explain the same thing 2 or 3 times, that alone can make a big difference. And when I say documents, specifically what I'm referring to when I say that is going to be your financial documents, which is mandatory disclosure, which are going to be your bank statements, credit card statements, tax statements, things like that. And for those of you listening, you might think to yourself, "Oh, Dunmire, what are you talking about? I mean, okay, how will I know what documents to provide to you?" That's a great question. So in every case that we have, we send out a very detailed email, and it says, these are the list of, I could pull up the email and look, but I think there's about 27 categories of documents, and it's pay stubs for these time periods, your tax returns for these time periods, your credit card statements for these time periods, copies of any leases, copies of any mortgage statements. And you might not have all of those documents. You might not even know what some of those documents are. And because of that, we do a financial intake call or a financial onboarding call with the paralegal who bills at a lesser rate than the attorney, who's very well versed in all this, and they go over all of the documents that we need. So if you're a client of ours and you take the time and you read the email and you look through the documents and you see what documents are needed and you collect them and you save them, and you do your financial intake call and have the paralegal, they can answer any questions, and certainly the attorney's here if you want to speak with the attorney and go over things. But if you work with the paralegal and the paralegal says, yes, we do need your tax returns, yes, we do need your W-2 or this 1099 or whatever, and then you get those documents over to us, and bonus points if they're saved so that we can kind of tell what document it is, so we don't have to actually go in there and resave everything, or if they're scanned as opposed to being sent as some sort of kind of JPEG file or something like that. We understand that everybody's scenario is different, but at the end of the day, we're not talking about 5 or 10 minutes here to rename some documents. We're talking about when you do the financial intake call, but you haven't read the email, or you never read the email because it's long and it asks you to do something, then we've got to call you to schedule the intake call. You do the intake call, but you don't really know what's going on, so you don't really have all the information. You're not sure if you filed taxes 3 years ago. You don't remember all your credit card statements, so then you reschedule the financial intake call, and then you have a second financial intake call. Then you send over some documents, but those documents aren't necessarily all the documents. And when you kind of get into that cycle, what ultimately is going to be happening is just tons of phone calls going back and forward. Then you're going to have an attorney put their hand into it and take a look at it and say, hey, we still need these documents. These documents weren't provided even though we asked them for it. And we get it. It's a little bit cumbersome, and some people need a little bit more help than others. But at the end of the day, if you as a client take the time to go over everything, and it's not something that you're going to do in 20 minutes, it's going to take some time. But the more time you spend getting the documents that we need, thereby meaning the less time that we have to spend tracking you down to get the documents, it's going to save you hours of work, which may be done depending on what work needs to be done by the paralegal or the attorney. So that alone in the financial world can definitely save a lot of money. What about the initial petition and asking for relief and reviewing it? Do you have any thoughts on that, Matt?
Well, I mean, I do. I mean, there's certain, I think that, and we can certainly touch on mandatory disclosure when it comes to the initial reviewing any initial documents. If the lawyer you're working with has you review documents, the more that you can review, and if you identify issues, write them down, consolidate things that you want to talk about. If you're reviewing, a draft parenting plan or a draft marital settlement agreement, as much work as you can do to fill in the blank spaces. For example, your lawyer might send you a parenting plan that has a lot of form language in there, but doesn't have any of the time-sharing schedule filled out. That's because, you, more than anybody else, you're going to know what your preferred time-sharing schedule is with your children. the more that you put thought and effort into trying to think about what time sharing arrangement is going to work for you, and you actually, maybe print out that document, fill it in, or if it's a fillable PDF or it's a Word document, whatever it is, or if you can't, you just got to respond by email. But the more effort that you put into those things, identify exactly which section, which paragraph of the agreement, which specific changes you would like to see, and maybe provide a little explanation why, and give all that information to your lawyer. That's going to be less phone calls, less iterations of the same drafted document. It's less work for the lawyers to do, so it's going to translate to more money saved. I kind of went over some things. I kind of wrote down a few things that I wanted clients to realize might be costing them, making their cases a lot more expensive than they need to be. And the first one is, don't be a storyteller. Everybody who gets into a divorce has a story to tell, and they're going through a really hard time. They've got a variety of very consequential issues that they're facing. That said, if you're working with a law firm, they might need very specific information. Before we file a petition, get it going, we need a very small amount of very critical information, and that's pretty much all we need to kind of get the case up and going. But the longer you spend, talking with the law firm, the paralegal, the lawyer, whatever it may be, giving them backstory, telling them your life story, how you were raised, and why you never wanted a divorce, and how nobody divorces in your family, and how this has caused a big problem. By all means, you go ahead. I love to hear from my clients. I love to know about them. I love to hear about their life story, and certainly to a certain extent in a divorce case, it could come into play. But for the most part, if your primary concern is kind of getting in and out of the divorce and getting what's fair and getting a good resolution, but doing so in an affordable, quick way, telling the lawyer your life story is really not going to save you much money, and it's not going to move the ball down the field. Do you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a really fine balance. The listeners on today's show are really going to get an inside look at the way that we kind of think about clients and client interaction and client management and things. This is a really fine balance because, number one, Matt and I, we don't nickel and dime. We're not, if we ask how you're doing, we're not asking how you're doing to extend a phone conversation. We're not suggesting anything like that. And there's certainly nothing wrong with a little bit of small talk or just getting to know each other or anything like that. But when it ultimately comes down to it, the amount of times that I've been on the phone with a client for 30 minutes and I'm just trying to get the very straightforward information. Hey, I just need a date, a name, an address, a birth date, whatever it might be. And it launches into this, okay, well, my spouse cheated on me. And I think that, that's definitely something that we should bring up. And certainly we have that discussion all the time with clients, and we explain that in the state of Florida, infidelity doesn't really matter. It certainly does have a place in some specific divorces, especially with the new alimony laws, but a lot of divorces don't ever get to that point. And then the only other time that infidelity is going to matter is if the infidelity caused a dissipation of marital assets. So, sometimes my follow-up question is, well, did your husband buy an apartment or a house for the person who he was having an affair with? No, he was just texting with somebody and whatever. Okay, I get it. It's tough. It's an emotional time, but that's not really going to play into the divorce, because this kind of goes back to what we talked about in previous episodes. The courts in Florida are unemotional. They're just kind of running numbers, finding information, splitting assets, and getting you out of there. And of course, there's all sorts of different types of cases. There's child custody cases, long-term marriage cases, everything. This is an overly simplified view of it, but they take the emotions out of it. And so if an affair doesn't have any bearing on an equitable distribution scheme or an equitable distribution worksheet or anything along those lines, because your spouse didn't dissipate any marital assets and it's not a long-term marriage, I get it. It's tough. It's an emotional it's an emotional time and you want to bring it up and you think it's important. And I'm not here to doubt what's important to you or what's not important to you. But when you get the bill, you remember that a phone conversation that may have been accomplished in 5 minutes or 10 minutes because you wanted to go through your husband's infidelity or your wife's infidelity, extends out to 20, 25 minutes or something along those lines. So it doesn't mean that I don't care about my clients by any stretch of the imagination. And again, I can't stress this enough. We don't nickel and dime clients, but if we're on the phone and we're working on your case and we're trying to get some information, there's going to be a bill for that phone call. And so that kind of shifts gears a little bit. One thing that you can do to drastically save money on your divorce, and this is something I tell a lot of my clients, is go get a counselor, get a therapist, especially if you're fortunate enough to have some health insurance that covers it, so you're only paying the $20 or $40 or $50 copayment or whatever. Our time is hundreds of dollars an hour. If you can go speak with a therapist for a copayment of $20 or $40, or even if you don't have health insurance, I think you're looking at about, maybe for a licensed mental health counselor or something, maybe like $100, $150 an hour. That is cheaper than an attorney's time. And those people are going to be much more qualified to get you through the emotional side of things. So if a client is having some really hard times with emotions, the best thing that you can possibly do is separate out the emotions on the left hand and the logic on the right hand, and treat your attorney with the logic. Yes, here's my date of birth, here's my social security number, here's the marital home address. The deed is, filed in Lake County. The mortgage is through Round Point Mortgage. I will get those for you. Give me 48 hours. Hang up the phone and then do the emotional side of things. My wife cheated on me. This is really tough. I can't believe that she betrayed me. I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to trust anybody again. Do that with your therapist. And the attorney bill is going to be drastically cheaper. And not only that, if you separate those, it's going to benefit you emotionally in the long run, because you're going to be talking to somebody who is licensed to give you legitimate advice as to mental health issues. And a lot of times, Matt and we will listen to clients and we can provide our own personal opinions. Oh, yeah, that's really tough. I'm sorry that you're going through this. But we're not licensed therapists. We don't have a treatment protocol for somebody who, their spouse got cheated on, or maybe you cheated on your spouse and it's weighing heavy on your heart. I mean, that's not something that we're trained in law school, and we can certainly give you the practical advice. Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay. Don't be too tough on yourself. Think about the future, not about the past. And we might even be able to give you some real good practical advice, but we're not therapists. And to stay on topic with today's podcast, from a billing perspective, you're going to be much better suited, whether you're paying a copayment or out of pocket, spending your hour with a therapist than you would be with an attorney. So I would definitely suggest trying to separate out the emotional side and the logical side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would also say another thing is to utilize the staff. Most law firms have attorney rates and paralegal rates, and the paralegals are going to be a lot more affordable than the attorneys are going to be. Some people are really adamant, hey, I only want to do business with you. I only want to hire your law firm if I can speak with the attorney. And yeah, absolutely. You should be able to speak with your attorney. Your attorney should not be hard to track down. We utilize scheduling links where we provide clients with scheduling links, and we reserve a certain amount of time on our calendars. Brian and I do every day, and clients can go in there and pick a date and time that works for them and schedule calls. So we're always available. But again, our rates are about double what the paralegals are. So, if it's just a quick call to provide some information, or you're just curious about something and it's not a legal specific question, you're not asking for specific legal advice, it's just more general information about the process, or, questions about specific paperwork or items that we've requested from you. If you could call and speak with the paralegal, it's going to save you money versus insisting on speaking with a lawyer about certain things. Now, again, there are certain things that you're going to want to just talk to your lawyer about. Your lawyer's going to need to talk to you about. Not a paralegal is not going to work. But, we're just kind of looking at ways throughout the life of a case to try to keep the bills down. That's another one. So definitely encourage people to utilize the staff. And then another one is, when you are going to have a conversation with your attorney or the staff, you want to try to, there needs to be enough give and take. There needs to be a good open lines of communication between the client and the law firm throughout a divorce case. However, if your goal is to minimize the bill, you want to minimize the times that you have to interact and contact the law firm and vice versa. So like what Brian was saying at the beginning of this episode, where he was talking about mandatory disclosure, and if the law firm is asking for certain materials, the more legwork you do to go and find those materials, all the dates of those, if it's a year of bank statements, you don't just provide 9 months, you provide a year. The more legwork you do, saving, formatting, uploading the documents, however it is that you want to get the documents to your attorney. But if you spend more time doing that, you're going to save money. But the other thing is, keep a list of questions. Throughout the process, you're always going to have questions. Things are going to be popping in your mind, concerns, worries. And, go ahead and, if you can, schedule a call with your attorney, but keep a list of these questions to kind of just knock out everything in one go. What you don't want to do, again, if saving money is a primary concern on the legal expenses, which it is for most people, you don't want to be, every time a thought pops in your head, you don't want to be getting on the phone trying to call the lawyer or speak with the paralegal. It's going to be much more efficient if you're able to kind of keep a list of things that, keep a list of questions or keep a list of issues that you want to discuss, and try to knock out as much as you can in each call.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one thing that I was going to bring up is, and there'd be a couple of different ways. If you want to make a little system for yourself, if you wanted to, you could just have a running list and, once a month, call up your attorney and say, hey, I want to speak with Brian. Can I schedule 30 minutes or an hour? And you could have your list there and, hey, I've got these 8 questions, and you do it at one time. That would be a pretty formal way to do it. The other thing too is, a lot of times we'll get phone calls from clients, and it's something urgent from them, and we'll chat with them, and it ends up not being urgent. There's no emergency, and that's fine. I understand it. I get it. I'm not unsympathetic to anybody, but it's one little question, and phone call might take 10 or 15 minutes or something along those lines. And there for some phone calls, there might even be some prep time that we have to do for it before the phone call. So you might there might be a portion of the bill that includes a prep time, and then there might be a follow-up letter that we need to do or something along those lines. For something that maybe if you look back at it 2 weeks later, you think to yourself, I didn't really care that much about it. It was just something that just popped into my head. And that's where the list comes into play, because, every day in every facet of our lives, we have these thoughts. And, that moment that the thought pops into your head, you need the answer to it. I love power tools. So, I get these thoughts that come into my head about power tools from time to time. Oh, I wonder if Milwaukee has a new M12 battery for sale or something like that. And I feel like I have to incessantly go check Home Depot. But then inevitably, if I forget about it, maybe 2 weeks later, I could be like, what was that power tool thought I had again? Because it's just not really that important. And if the initial instinct is, when you have any thought that pops into your head, to pick up your phone and call your attorney and try and get your attorney on the phone, all those, point ones, point twos, maybe even point threes for the phone calls are going to add up. And, you do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a month. It's going to add up. It might not seem like it does, but I see it on the bills. And again, you'll probably hear this another time throughout the podcast. Matt and I do not nickel and dime our clients, but if you call and you speak to the attorney and we give you some advice, it's going to be on the bill. And those bills add up, and we're not ignorant of that. And I'll even tell my clients, hey, it might just be a little bit better if you just, in the future, write down things and call me, once every 2 weeks, and we can just hammer everything out. That's definitely the best way to go about doing things. The thing that family law is very big into is having clients review documents. So it could be anything from, 1-page stipulation to, 10-page motion or something. And, it could be something pretty standard to something pretty spicy, just depending on the issue. And what I would say is that when you're reviewing a document, kind of the same concept. Try and take the time that evening, or whenever it is. If you have a printer, great. Actually, print it out. If we're your law firm, we'd be more than happy to mail you a copy. It's not a big deal at all if you want a hard copy of it and it's not time sensitive. But whatever it is, take it and look at it and write down all of the changes or the things that your attorney needs to update or correct. Because remember, we get to know our clients pretty well throughout this entire process, but we don't know every single fact of every single scenario. And so when we're drafting a motion, sometimes you got to kind of fill in the gaps or whatever. Oh, it was about 6 p.m. at night, when this incident occurred, because we didn't know the exact time. But then, the client will correct us and be like, no, it's actually 8:30, and that's important because we had a couple of glasses of wine at dinner or something like that. Oh, okay, cool, no problem. So if we're drafting some sort of motion in that context, it would be much better for you to look through the entire motion and say, okay, I need to tell Dunmire, I need to tell Waring that it was at 8:30 at night. We had 2 glasses of wine. Then the fight ensued or whatever it might be. Versus you read the first paragraph, you email the attorney and say, hey, this section's wrong. Then, an hour later you email, hey, by the way, it was at 8:30. And then you send another email. Oh, now that I think about it, it was more like 8:37. Just put all of that in one email, one phone call, whatever it is when you're reviewing a document, so that it's all concise and you go over it and things of that nature. And that's definitely going to help with the bill, because the going back and forward is definitely something that can increase the bill substantially. So,
also, another good one is pay attention to instructions and do your homework. Yes, clients in divorce cases, they get assigned homework. Not only like what Brian was just saying, reviewing documents that need to be filed with the court, but also when it comes to that mandatory financial disclosure, which we have in Florida. Again, mandatory, not optional disclosure, not disclosure if I feel like it. It's mandatory disclosure. And there's a lot of documents that are going to be needed. There's bank statements, there's tax returns, there's mortgage interest statements, car lease agreements, auto insurance, health insurance, life insurance, pension plans. And these statements are 6 months, a year. Some of them are even 2 years. The more of that homework that you can get done, and your lawyer doesn't have to bug you for it, and the paralegals don't have to constantly email you for it, the cheaper your bill's going to be. It's simple as that. And, there's also a lot of time deadlines that apply in divorce cases in Florida. Mandatory disclosure, you got 45 days to get it done. What happens if you don't do your homework and you don't have those documents ready, or you can't find them? Maybe you tried and you had to reset a password and you can't log into the email that the password reset notification goes to. We've all been there. I mean, that happens to me on a daily basis, and it's annoying every single time. But if you give up, it doesn't get done. And nobody else can access a lot of this information besides you. So what happens if you don't stay on schedule? Well, then your lawyer's probably going to have to file a motion for extension of time. And then they're going to have to work out an agreed order with opposing counsel. So that's phone calls between your lawyer and the opposing counsel. And then there might need to be a hearing set. And then you got to go to a hearing. And the lawyer's got to go to the hearing. It's going to be billed. And then at the end of the month, you get this really fat bill. And it's because the lawyer's doing what he or she is required to do to protect you, because you didn't get them the documents on time. So if keeping the bill low is your priority, you're going to want to pay attention to instructions. You're going to want to do your homework and stay on schedule, and make sure that you're getting these things to your lawyers or your law firm on time, so you can avoid the motion for extension of time issue and save money on your bill.
And I think that is just absolutely great advice, 100% spot on, very specific. I want to step back and go a little bit more general. And one thing that you can do to help lower your bill is understand that just because you hire a law firm, that doesn't mean that you do not have to do anything in the divorce process. You're still a pivotal player in the divorce process. because you're going to need to get the financial paperwork. You're going to need to get the copy of your driver's license. And all of these things, if you're listening to this podcast, you might just think to yourself, is it really that big of a deal? I mean, yeah, it is. And I know it's also a giant pain in the butt sometimes to log on to Capital One and get 12 months of credit card statements. But like Matt just said, if you don't get it, who's going to get it? And if we don't have it, the other party's going to ultimately say, well, why didn't you produce it? And then we're left in a scenario where there's a motion to compel filed against us. God forbid, the judge grants it. It goes to a hearing. You got to pay for attorney time for the hearing. You might even have to pay for your spouse's fees. It's just things like that. So to say it maybe a little bit differently, you've got to understand that as much as we personally try to handhold our clients' hands, and we think we do a pretty good job here doing that and really explaining things and saying, hey, we need this, this, and this, sending you emails, sending you correspondence, these are the documents we need, this is the next step. It at some point there's a little bit of personal responsibility, and you've got to understand that means you need to help us get those documents. And it could be, if you have an accountant and the accountant has all your taxes, give us your accountant's phone number and we can call your accountant and get it from them. But again, that's going to result maybe in a little bit higher bill versus if you just call your accountant and say, hey, can you send me PDF copies of my last 3 tax returns? Because there's nothing preventing you from doing that. And understanding that anything that you can do to facilitate getting the documents is going to help in the long run. The other thing too is, what's the classic Kenny Rogers song, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Mm-hmm. Just because you can fight about something doesn't mean it's necessarily worth your time. I've had, any divorce attorney will tell you this, I've had phone calls where the clients call about something and they spend more just on the phone call in a billable time than it would be if they just hadn't brought it up. Okay, little stuff here or there, like a $19 gym membership that might have gotten canceled. Okay, is it a violation of the standing family law order? Possibly. If it's been pulled out of the, if it's a normal course of business and it's been pulled out of the joint checking account and your wife cancels the gym membership or your husband cancels the gym membership. But I mean, what do you want your attorney to do about that? Could we file a motion to impose sanctions for violating the family law order because your spouse canceled your gym membership? So that means you got to, first off, get the family law order, review it, make sure that it actually qualifies. Number 2, file the motion. Number 3, probably under the court rules, have a good faith conference with opposing counsel about the motion to see if they'll agree to a proposed order. Number 4, get a hearing set. Number 5, attend the hearing. Then number 6, draft the proposed order after the hearing if the judge even grants it. But chances are in that scenario that you're going to get to the hearing and the judge is going to look at you and say, are you really coming to me because the husband canceled the gym membership? You think this is an effective use of court time? I mean, and if that's really important to you and you just really want to try and stick it to your spouse, number 1, I would tell you that's not when you try and stick it to your spouse. And number 2, you just spent more money. You could have bought a home gym for the amount of money that you just spent fighting over that gym membership. So having some discretion, just because somebody does technically violate a family law order, having some discretion in bringing that up and talking to your attorney about it and pursuing it definitely will help you save money in the long run. And thinking much bigger picture, you got a marital house, we have 2 kids, we need a time sharing plan, and we need child support calculations. That's the end goal, not who's going to pay for the UFit or the Planet Fitness or the LA Fitness gym membership or something along those lines.
Yeah, and and this kind of piggybacking off of what Brian's saying about the standing family law orders, without a doubt, the absolute best strategy that you can employ to increase your legal expenses, all right, is to violate family law orders, is to misbehave, and just generally cause mayhem in your case. Almost every single Florida county, and there's 67 of them, have standing family law orders that apply to your case before you even file the divorce petition. If you violate those orders, the opposing parties can file motions for temporary relief, they can file motions for contempt, they can They can seek injunctions to prevent you from doing certain activities. Those things are going to require responses from your lawyers, multiple phone calls, multiple emails, investigation, gather evidence. You need to attend hearings. That's the best way to drive up your bill. If you want to drive up your bill as high as it can go, misbehave. And I'm saying that sarcastically. Don't misbehave in a divorce case. Do not do, and I'll give you some examples in a moment. But like the motion practice, the phone calls, investigation, everything, it adds up really quickly. And if you want to keep your bills down, then what you'll do, you won't misbehave. And I'll just give you some examples of what misbehaving is so you can avoid it. You file a divorce petition or you get served with a divorce petition, maybe your spouse filed it against you, and you cut off your spouse's cell phone. You cancel your life insurance policy, or you change the beneficiary on your life insurance policy. You just stop paying bills. You stop paying the mortgage. You stop paying for rent, utilities. You might think, your spouse kicked you out of the house and you're continuing to pay the mortgage and the light bill, and now they filed a divorce case against you, and you're like, I'm done paying it. I'm just going to stop paying. You're going to get hit. You're going to get hit with a motion. You're going to have to go to a hearing on it. It is much better in the long run to eat those costs, because these standing family law orders, they want to try to maintain the status quo during the divorce process. So until you get like a mediated settlement agreement, you really can't start, you can't raid joint and savings accounts and withdrawing money. Certainly don't sell, destroy, or hide your spouse's possessions. Don't engage in what we call cyber stalking, which is just pestering your spouse with emotionally charged text messages and emails. Certainly don't threaten anybody. Don't interfere with your spouse's access to the children. Don't try to hold the children away from your spouse in a divorce to try to gain some sort of leverage. You're going to get hit with emotion. Other things people do to misbehave: they avoid service of process. They quit their jobs to try to avoid child support or alimony. They commit crimes like assault, battery, false imprisonment, domestic violence. Some people take the kids and just flee the state, and you got to track them down. All of those things are going to be violations of standing family law orders, and they're going to drive up the cost of your cases extremely fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the last thing is the last little tidbit here to keep the bills down, and Brian already touched on a little bit. Don't take unreasonable positions. Divorce is a highly emotionally charged atmosphere. It's a difficult process. But if you're taking untenable, unreasonable positions, for example, Florida courts favor 50-50 time sharing. Florida courts want each parent to have equal access to the children. Children often do better. Studies show that children do better in when they have equal time with both parents. Unless your spouse has a felony domestic violence conviction, or is raging alcoholic who got a DUI last week with the kids in the car, or other very egregious circumstances, most likely you're going to end up with a 50-50 time sharing plan, unless the other spouse just agrees to accept less time, and that might happen in your case. But you don't want to go into a divorce case thinking, I'm going to fight for 100% custody. I'm going to fight for 100% time sharing. When your other spouse is a decent human being, you might not think so, but objectively a decent human being, and wants to be involved in their child's life, it would be an unreasonable position to think that you're going to get 100% time sharing. And to continue to fight for 100% time sharing is going to be an exercise in futility, and it's really not going to do anything other than drive up the legal expenses for both sides.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I know that wouldn't even be something that Matt or I would do unless there was some basis for it. We wouldn't fight for 100% time sharing just because our spouse says that they want 100% time sharing when there's no legal basis for it, like Matt said, raging alcoholism or domestic violence. But that actually reminds me, another really good thing would be just to be honest with your attorney about things. And good, bad, and the ugly. And the time to say the ugly is at the beginning of the case so that we know about it. Remember, when you speak with your attorney, your attorney's office, all those conversations are attorney-client privilege. And if you say, look, my wife really has no idea, but I actually had an affair, and I don't know if it's going to come out or not, but that's something that I'm really nervous about. So because of that, some of the decisions that I make might be, premised on that. And of course, we have duties on as attorneys, so we have to comply with court rules. We can't lie. You have to tell the truth under penalties of perjury and things like that. But if we know that from the very beginning, it might prevent us from kind of doing this. If you're watching the video, or scratching our heads like, why isn't he giving us these credit card statements, when, and at least it just fills in a hole for us so we know. Okay, it doesn't mean that we can't give over the statements, but so being honest with your attorney and telling them, look, before we got divorced, my wife and I got into a huge fight, just a massive fight. There's no violence involved, but she's probably going to say X, Y, and Z, or my husband's probably going to say X, Y, and Z, that I did this, or whatever it might be. Because a lot of times, I hear those stories and I just kind of shrug my shoulders. I'm like, it's not a big deal. I'm not too worried about it. But if you don't say that, and then we get hit with a motion for exclusive use of the marital property because on March 15th, the husband consumed so much alcohol that he was falling over drunk and smashed a dresser on the ground or something along those lines, and we get hit with that motion, and then I call you and I hear it for the first time. Oh yeah, that was actually the whole reason why my wife said that we were going to get a divorce, because she said she wasn't going to put up with my drunk ass anymore. Well, that kind of changes how we might view the case, in the sense of, okay, well, instead of going down this direction, we need to go down a different direction. So definitely tell your attorney everything, good, bad, and ugly, at the beginning of the relationship. And kind of going back to effective time management when you're speaking on the phone. And I don't want anybody listening to think that I'm suggesting that we cut callers short, or that should occur or anything. But one of the best questions, that if you're just really conscious about the bill, and your attorney calls you, hey, Mike, it's Brian Dunmire, Fairway Law Group. I just wanted to call, go over the petition with you. How's everything going? Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I'm doing good. More than happy. One of the best questions you can ask is, what do you need me to tell you? What do you need me to tell you? Yeah. What do you need to know? Why don't you just ask me, and I'll just answer. And I know that when I get that phone call from time to time, I tell the clients, I was like, look, I'm more than happy to sit here and listen to anything you have to say, because I don't want you to think that I'm this cold individual. Don't want you to think that I'm just trying to rush through things. However, if you want me to just ask you the questions, we can just fire down and get this done in 10 minutes. Yeah, go ahead and ask me. Okay, when were you married? How long have you been married? Do you have any minor children? Is there any allegations of domestic violence, drug abuse, alcoholism? Anything? No. Any prior DUIs? No. Are you working? Yes. Where are you working? Disney World. Okay. How much do you make? $50,000 a year. How much does your wife make? I'm not 100% sure, but I think she makes about $75,000 a year. Okay. Boom. Da-da-da-da-da. Right? You can get all of that information, and that if you're really conscious about a bill and you just want to minimize time, don't be afraid to just ask the attorney, why don't you just tell me exactly what you need to know? And balance that. If there's something that you feel like you should tell the attorney, hey, I just want to let you know we got in a really big fight, right before the divorce was filed. Do you need to hear about that? Yeah, tell me a little bit about it. Was there any domestic violence? No. Okay, no problem. Whatever. It's fine. Don't worry about it. If you're really conscious about the bill, don't be afraid to just ask your attorney, what do you need me to tell you? What information? You want to just go down a list? Because I'll do it happily. Mm-hmm. I'll happily do it with my clients. No problem whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It honestly makes our lives a little easier too, because we just get the information we need and say, okay, cool, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and get everything filed, and we'll be in touch with you in about 2 or 3 days. And that issue's wrapped up, put on the shelf, the bill's finalized at that point, and it is what it is. So don't be afraid to ask your attorney, what do you need me to tell you? Or do you want to just ask me the questions that you need to know?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Definitely agree. I could save people a lot of time and a lot of money if they just let me ask the questions and they answered my questions directly. Okay. All right. Well, that's about all we have on that issue. That'll wrap up our episode here. I think it's episode 5, I believe, of Divorce Well in Florida, What to Know Before Your Spouse Does. And have a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode.